Okay, thank you, Mauricio. The roundtable discussions we had also, I think it was an excellent session, which was a plenary session, so we put it separate in this presentation. Again, I try to make a very short summary. And yeah, well, the roundtable was, you could say, much focused on the same topics we have already discussed. But it gave a good view of how the different network operators were looking to the picture. So if you look to the summary I try to compose, it's again, the digital agenda is driving the development and role of next generation networks. And also I think we had some more discussion on why the digital agenda is important. How, and that was also, I think, introduced, is how important, you could say, the rollout of broadband is for the welfare of Europe, and especially also taking into account the position of Europe within the rest of the world, and so we need to focus on this digital agenda. We're also discussing who will be happy. Well, it was very important that the customer will be happy because he gets more services, more possibilities to use the internet with high bandwidth, more services. So there's not a discussions. The main discussion is again that the network operators have big challenges to keep the business case positive, and I think we heard during the roundtable some issues how network operators are struggling, and that's especially in the I call it the non-high urban areas or the rural areas, wherever you can make a division on that. And again, here the discussion was that regulation is very important in this area. You know, so we come back to, you would say, the first session, where the regulators need also to define the way forward, and there is no, you could say, simple solution for this at the moment. Discussion items, again, I think the same topic was mentioned in the first session. Is the 100 megabit per household objective not much too high? And like Frans already said, well, maybe we should make our objective a little bit less ambitious, but also then start with regulation on the universal service obligation. And the other, I think, important thing, talking about the users. Well, we will not achieve 100% usage of internet, and that's also a challenge where you can say, well, getting as much as possible is nice, but 100%, reaching 100% will be not achievable. I think we had also discussions on that there will always be a group of people which can't or are not interested to use internet. Another interesting item during the discussion of the roundtable was should we not apply a tax on users to enable the investment on next generation networks, as was used in other examples where that was the green energy, where all the users are now paying, you could say, a kind of tax to make it possible that we get green energy. Well, in the same way you could have a tax paid by everybody on making, you know, it possible to have all the investment in next generation networks. And again, that's, you would say, increasing the complexity of the building of the next generation networks. I think also one of the issues was mentioned there is yes, it's nice we talk about broadband, and I think we focused during these 2 days on two of the objectives, but there were other objectives, for instance, that, and I remember that from the first presentation, that the small and medium enterprises should use internet for buying stuff, but also for selling their products. And also there you see quite, you could say, a discrepancy between the objective and what is at the moment achieved. And this was also mentioned during the roundtable that, for instance, all the hospitals and the healthcare sector is not really using broadband in the way it's available. And there you see, you have to, you could say, the cultural differences between the different sectors. And I remember we had a few years ago a presentation also on Nico Baken, where he, you could say, pled for the transsectoral working together within the different sectors, because we are focusing in providing broadband, but the other sectors should use it, and yeah, maybe we should even do more on explaining other sectors how they really could profit from broadband. And another interesting discussion was again putting it in you could say the European perspective, where we have a high ambition to get the next generation networks roll out, but we do that with 200 or more competing companies in Europe. Where you look to other geographies, it's only a few, which makes, you could say, a part of the equation a little bit simpler. So maybe this is another interesting thought, but I think that has all to do with are we one Europe, or are we 26 companies, countries which work together on some areas? And then I think we enter in the interesting discussion whether we should have the euro or not the euro. So I think that's something a little bit different. So that was a short overview of, I must say, a very interesting roundtable discussion we had yesterday. And what I also think, we have now seen the track A conclusions, track B conclusions. I think these are, you could say, the main items which we can take away from this Congress. And of course there are a lot of details and issues, but I think with these topics, most of the topics of the Congress are used on a very high level. So I didn't make very, you could say, more general recommendations or conclusions from this Congress, as you could say these items where we try to focus on are we delivering the right thing, how to implement it, how do we involve other groups, and how do we provide our services to other sectors, and how do we work together in one Europe. I think most of, you would say, topics in the others sessions has a relationship with this. So I thought it's nice to finalize the overview of the Congress with just this summary of the roundtable discussion. So from this, I'd like to finalize the overview, and we can have a short discussion. But before that, I think I should thank all the speakers for the excellent contributions, and the chairman for providing this overview, and of course you as public for doing the discussion. So before handing over the floor again, I think, to Mauricio, are there any builds on, you could say, the complete overview of all the sessions we had and this summary, which we need to discuss now? I see Andy is, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim. I think it was a generally very interesting Congress, and a lot of the key points came out. Can I just raise one thing that I think was missed, if I may? And that is, the conclusion was, I think, if I just summarize, that there's a drive for higher bandwidth and so on, but no one really knows where the new revenues will come from. Yep. So revenue is not so at best, the revenues may be kept steady rather than declining, but the capacity has to go up. So what was not touched upon during the Congress at all, in any of the discussions, was the fact that the probably the main driver pushing network operators towards next generation network is cost reduction. And cost reduction didn't really come out in the discussions. The biggest reason for moving in the core network to NGN is not for new revenues, because there are hardly any of those. Mm-hmm. It is to reduce the operating cost, the OPEX. And the other big driver of moving to NGN is to reduce the capital cost as well. But certainly driving down the OPEX is something that network operators have just got to do, given the reduction in tariffs and new revenues. And so just leave my view that most of the aspects were covered very nicely, I think, in terms of change the regulation, in terms of where can we find better commercial models. But what was missing for me was, can we really drive down those costs as well? Because that's probably going to make a bigger contribution to the financial health than the prospect of new revenues. Thank you.
Thank you. Any reaction, comments on this one? Yep. Oh, sorry. Yep. First one. Yep.
Sorry.
No problem.
Sorry. Responding to Andy's point, it strikes me that one of the key things for that kind of reduction in cost is automation, where that's coming from, how that's driven, and where the systems are going to come to realize that from. I know certainly in my own organization, a lot of the OSS systems are driven by off-the-shelf products. These are off-the-shelf products that are for a very general market and perhaps do not address the key drivers that are unique to a telecoms operator.
Okay. Jos, you want to add on that also?
Yes, on this aspect, there was an interesting point made. I lost his name, but he was the keynote speaker in the quality of service session. He said, well, there's two things. If you have a network, then you have that normally for a very long time. So then you're interested in bringing your costs down and minimizing the costs. But if you are a service provider, services normally have a short life, especially nowadays, if they have a life at all, because there is, let's say, everybody's developing and it needs to be done in a couple of months, and I think the success rate is maybe 20–30%. So if you have that up, the only thing you're interested in is getting your money back, so revenue maximization is there the point. So it's two things which, let's say, are in different fields. One cannot do the other.
Yeah, and I think, if I may react on that also myself, I think we have seen some examples, because why are the costs high? It's not about the components itself, it's much more about the complexity we have built, you could say, the networks, and you could say maybe we should split the network in different parts and focus on different areas, and for instance the services as a separate, you could say, business, and not mix up, you could say, services with networks, etc. So maybe a next step could be to decompose, you could say, the network in more, how do you say it, layers on its own, with their own, you could say, business and profitability, and making much more. And I think one of the presentations was also talking about having much more, you could say, the APIs between your network and your services. And yeah, you could say decouple service development from network development. A little bit like, I think everybody is knowing now, the applets in the Apple Store, etc., where you could say the development of the applications is completely separate, you could say, from the platform. And maybe, and I think I agree with Andy on that, maybe that could be one of the topics, and I think we will transfer that also to the Polish delegation, that should be part of the call for papers for next year, how to decompose this complex beast as the next generation network in more, you could say, smaller pieces which can be managed in a more cost-effective way. I think this may be a conclusion we can take forward from this. Do you agree? I see you nodding, Andy. You want to add? Anyone want to add on that?
Thanks. A very quick comment. I mean, what I heard is perfectly understandable. Understandable if you still think to reason in a context where the market structure is the same, the traditional approach to economy is the same. But we haven't to forget that we are in phase of a very profound change. Think about issues like sustainability, think about issues like the Internet of Things. These issues should, let's say, completely change our framework of reference. Important changes are, let's say, are coming, and I think we should also start thinking that we are a generation that have seen communication linking people. Now we should prepare ourselves for communication linking objects, and this could make a very huge difference. And we have to be prepared for that.
Thank you for your build on that, and I think this is a very important point also. And I will take care that we get this message, especially to the Polish people, for the call for papers for next year. Barry, you have?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'm very impressed with how we got this all together in such a short time. That's a great piece of work. Secondly, what seems to be coming across to me is that there are, if you come up with a theme for a conference, out of that perhaps comes a few nuggets, like for instance the Internet of Things, with regards to the digital divide. Who really needs 100 megabits anyway? And isn't 10 megabits just sufficient? Maybe there's about 6 or 7 areas that are hot topics in themselves, and that they should be stitched into the next Congress. Yeah. So that rather than coming to a conclusion with these things, we put them in beforehand, and we actually advertise that these things will be discussed as well. It's just a suggestion.
No, I was also thinking that maybe we could say we create from this some questions, topics to be further discussed, and maybe we could even put them on our website as you could say a discussion item which feed into the next call for papers. Yeah. Okay.